Good morning, colleagues. My name is Michal. I'm Prague, doing my PhD in the military history, but I also already work in Military History Institute in Prague. In my talk, I'll show you that something became like an experiment for me because I'm very happy being here. And I asked myself, like, how can I look in some part of Warhammer lore from point of view of historian and military historian? Don't worry, we won't be counting uh, the tanks or which strategy is the best. We'll look more onto the cultural side of things. And my topic are the Death Korps of Krieg. Before I give some brilliant Fragestellung, I'll made my liberty to start with the sources. This picture for me was basically, you can even call it a start of my research into this paper. It just happened 20 years ago. It's from the second Codex Imperial Guard for third edition, where there are these various editions and various armies presented. And I still think, I hope you can read it behind me, that this is like the concentrated form of what the Death Corps are. And also, as you can see, my first reaction was, wow, that's a cool soldier. You have the visual side, gas mask, great coat. You have the basic lore, 500 years of civil war, atomic cleansing, fighting in the trenches and razor wire, grim determination. You also have a rules aspect, which defined at the time Death Corps got, the Imperial Guard got a set of so-called regimental doctrines. So that the Rough Rider squadrons, but they were hardened fighters, die-hard, they were super, that iron discipline. This was like my first taking off point. It's also part of what I would like to call the first generation of the Krieg lore. From my actual research, the very first time Kriegs were mentioned, it was in the third edition Imperial Guard Codex. It's the picture in the middle, and they were presented among like dozens and dozens character concepts. They were further expanded during the for Armageddon campaign, and you can see on one side image from the chapter approved 2003, which further expanded their lore, and also in the army list and background of Siege Masters regiments, which were present in the specialist game Epic Armageddon. Since then, their background and sources evolved. I think the most important part was publication of Imperial Armor series Siege of Rax, which established them as like more fleshed out army with their own character. Important lore is also a series of novels and short stories by Steve Lance, which I think are still like something like get together for many people into the Kriegs, especially his Dead Man Walking. They were mentioned through the background books, even some novels, but current, what I would like to call third generation of their lore, was presented with the new Kill Team edition, Kill Team Octarius. It also gave us plastic miniatures. And I would say that this is this concentrated current way that how Kriegs look like. And they're like really like, they have this synthesized and trademarkable identity. That's why I'll be following most of the older bits and older lore, as I think it's more interesting for research at how we got here to the point that, I see some Krieg models over there. My question is pretty basic. So who are the Death Corps on Krieg and what do they represent? Of course, the first answer seems a bit obvious. Like, there are some signs, be honest. Like, obviously, when they started, visuals, the very German word for war is their name. And sometimes they're portrayed with Pickelhaube, sometimes with steel helms. There's a very, very strong German World War I, World War II identity. But I think, I propose that it goes beyond it. Of course, good people on the internet already made the research for me. So I thank I've thanked the guy who analyzed the Forge World model and saw that it's not like they are one-to-one Germans. But in this miniature design, you can already see something which was like problem even in the real world, that how to make something less German. On the one side, you see helmet. That's interwar Czechoslovak helmet pattern 20, which came from the Austro-Hungarian stock and was basically like the First World War steel helm. But the Czechoslovakia, as it wanted to move from this imperial identity, needed to not to look it that German. So they put a crest from the French Adrian helmet on, and that's official pattern 20. It has no function whatsoever. It's from the point of design. It was just attempt to change this image. And basically, I think Games Workshop, 100 years later, did the same thing. So, but let's not get bogged down in the equipment. I think that Kriegs are not only German, that it started that way, but they are a representation of collective memories of World War I, World War II, but also fears of atomic war and probably World War III, and anxieties of civil wars. And they show like, and they want to follow like who has their big topic is like who and why have to die and how they lose the control over the world. Some basics I try to try to put in my theories, working with the concept of total war as idea of total mobilization of society and the state, the cultural memory of war. You see, I'm giving you a bit of the condensed theory, not a lot of books there, but they are behind it. That cultural memory of war is ways how we, memories, experience, legacies, and constructed images made us remember wars, how various actors transfer this knowledge and this cultural image. And both aesthetics and background lore or facts are important there. And one topic which I was inspired by one of the academic papers of Warhammer, and finally I read Necropolitics, is this duality of biopolitics, necropolitics, theories concerning the right of sovereign power over the population and its bodies, and the life and death. And these are the themes that will be moving through my presentation. First World War as image is most obvious one. Trench warfare, gas mask imagery, and the hopelessness and futility of the war are at the core of Greek appeal and what they show. You can see that it goes even to the specific image. You can see that black and white illustration also from the third edition codex of Greek Death Rider, which is pretty much one of one, this iconic image of German cavalrymen during the First World War. The Greek Grenadiers are reimagining of the World War I shock troops in the various armies, not only German one. And even their tactics are mostly, or how Greeks wage war is often pretty much one of one how we see that these big offensives of First World War took place. There's this phrase from Steve Lyon's the novelization of Siege of Raqs, which describes how Greeks moved in 3 waves. 500,000 men went over the top, they all died, and only if they make a breakthrough, there would be an tank regiment which will expand it, which is basically British attempt at tactics at Somme to 1918. Complete waste of life, complete loss of control from the individual soldiers. Of course, the trench aesthetics is very important to Greek. You can see like images from historical Western Front. And important thing is that for Greeks, Western Front is part of the imaginary. Different fronts, Eastern Front, Balkans, Middle East front. Nowadays, we know that they often were fought in quite different way, how this iconic Western image, Western Front looks like. And this image is often transferred to us through popular media. One of the screenshots is not historical, but you can see on the top are Greeks from Siege of Raqs, but under them is image from the movie Path of Glory, one of the greatest World War I movies. But it's not only about the First World War. They are not First World War Germans. There is also this slightly more disturbing level of Second World War imagery. Greeks represent mass industrial warfare. They show like this total mobilization, fanaticism, and fighting to the death, which became, unfortunately, the hallmark of the Second World War. They also represent a totalitarian dream of total societal control. there are actually some problematic imageries considered when if you see one of the conversions of Krieg soldier from Steel Legion with this skull mask and slightly darker uniform, like you are looking at like maybe it's look a bit like Waffen SS, like it's maybe not directly, but you got these vibes, you got these images. Of course, sometimes, because even beyond that, the army which fought on wrecks was officially titled 88 Greek Siege Army, which, let's say, it's a bit of the unfortunate implications. We know how this number is often used as very, something among various World War II fans or, let's be honest, neo-Nazis. But there is one much more disturbing thing that Greeks don't have names officially. They are still working around it in various source materials, but they are only numbers. And the Second World War is a moment when, in certain, I don't want to get much into it, when people are reduced just to numbers. So you can see some echoes of that as well. But another thing, which I think also is important from an environmental or ecological standpoint, is the battles and destruction of the cities, how they happened during the Second World War. This like battle for Leningrad, Warsaw, Stalingrad, Berlin, they are one of the most horrible moments and shows how what total war can do to the whole society. And Greeks and their lord works on that. This, you can see the quote from the 5th edition Imperial Guard Codex, which for time became quite famous, and it shows it was some timeline short story about how Greeks were supposed to be an honor guard, and then they suppressed local rebellion. And I think that 2 points are important in this longer quote. You can read it. Inhabitants are mercilessly gunned down as they try to break out from the besieged city. War crimes. And second one, at the very end, the idea that Greeks fought on even after have issued its unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender is a concept that came to be in the Second World War, and they are shown that they are even beyond that. Again, imagery is very important. Despite being imaged as World War I, Greeks are often portrayed with a lot of fighting armor. You see the old epic Ragnarok tank, which is basically KV-1. But also, as I say, often images are more important than what actually happened. And I think that for memory of the Second World War, the Saving Private Ryan is one of the pivotal films. And basically what you see in Saving Private Ryan, I think must have moved like to, and this image of Allied landing crafts moved to the design of the Krieg Gorgon transport, which works on similar way. It even has the 2 machine gunners on the side, but it's not going from the sea, but through the no man's land. Another important part of Krieg imagery is the vision of nuclear war, the idea of apocalypse and fighting through it, that you kill the whole planet. You know, the Third World War, don't know what the Third World War will be fought of it. Fourth will be fought with sticks and stones, actually with shovels. But it's very important, and you can see one of the images I quite like is you see that cavalryman in the gas mask, which can be, yeah, that's right there, Greek cavalryman, but from propaganda images of the Chinese People's Army, which tested how conventional forces would operate after a nuclear test. I don't know if that guy survived. I have a bad feeling that no. And also this image that they are, gas mask also became a symbol of the possible nuclear war, as gas mask was transformed from the battlefield accessory to the tool of the civic defense. There is this very widely held image that if the world will happen, a nuclear winter, a poisoned air, we will be all wearing gas masks. And Greeks are actually doing that in the 41st millennium. Again, I found only yesterday that you can still get by Wayback Machine to the old Armageddon campaign website, and it's repeatedly mentioned that they, of course, they are expected to fighting in the deadliest war zones, and that they become specialists in fighting in the apocalypse, the war, and post-nuclear world. But one slightly less visible image, I think, that we have is that Greeks have also strong themes of the civil war. Their very background is described a bit in Steve Lyon's novel Greek as part of the flashbacks, is that they fought the civil war against the secessionists. And they do have several very important images which we connect with various civil wars armies. I think here are like Fight Revolution in Germany after 1918, the image of Freikorps there, but also Russian Civil War. Like civil wars and forces fighting there are often exhibited by strong motivation of volunteers, indoctrination of child soldiers, prosganging prisoners, and again, brutality, dehumanization, genocide, war crimes. But there, you can, the flag you see, I put something like different, how to work with the skull imagery, because of course, skull as an image of mortality and fear has long lineage. But in the aftermath of the First World War, this is a standard of the first Czechoslovak shock battalion, Czechoslovak legions during the Russian Civil War. And skull images in this very often used by these elite units, strongly motivated volunteers, even at the end of the First World War and in the civil wars. And in case of Russian Civil War, it has this specific meaning that those are forces who are willing to submit to the absolute discipline and following even suicide orders. So, and this is, I think, a very important part. Like image, skull is important image of imperium as it is, but in this, it plays this role. And with civil wars, you only also get guilt. You have guilt of compatriots' actions that enemies that cause the civil war because you are part of one society and part of it fails, but also guilt of your actions, like what you do when you suppress or win the civil war. And this is even explicitly stated in some material. It's from the I like the quote from Dead Man Walking novel that men of Krieg still bear the guilt of their world sins. It has nothing but its children, and so it gives them guidelines, something. This redemptive process basically radicalize them. And again, this is from novel Krieg, which shows some first victories of the Death Corps against the secessionists. And when Colonel Yurton, the leader of Krieg, saying that the commander of the prisoners of rebels will be executed, but the rest is allowed to rethink their allegiances. Post these penitent traitors to the front lines of battle. Why not give them that chance? And it's, again, important way of the civil wars often use it's happened in the Russian Civil War, Chinese Civil War, that they press again and conscripted their defeated enemies and gave them a chance for redemption. So, probably to conclude, total war is a concept that moves between bodies, minds, landscapes. This very idea of how you get so many Krieg, we had a bit of discussion already this evening, but now I'll give you just a short version. The very idea how to get so many soldiers in such a devastated world, because you need a lot of manpower for waging a total war, especially in the World War I, World War II style. It was solved by the narrative device, VT. I'll probably screw the pronunciation. VT Wump, Vitae Wump. Who knows? It's low Gothic or high Gothic either way, which serve as some external incubator for new Krieg. So the section, so it's something else from Brave New World novel, if you know it. So it explains how they get so much manpower, but also I think woman power, but that's probably from a different paper. And it also takes one important thing. It solves the problem, because I haven't talked about one important part of any total war and civil war, anything, and it's probably sexual violence and this reproductive dimension. Because these are toy soldiers to be played with, and as any Slaanesh players know, that it's quite hard to use this properly and also to sell by the big corporation we all love. This idea that Krieks are raised without sex and they are not committing sexually based war crimes, only like the cool ones, like the mass slaughter of civilians, is put away. And again, the idea of Greek code of sacrifice is like I think they are ultimate expression of this totalitarian visions of what soldiers should do, but also they show that they're ultimate expression of imperial guard, as it should be like those disposable troops, and it has some unfortunate implication not only in Greeks and how the colonial empires use their colonial troops. With erasure of identity in Greek, total indoctrination, also last Steve Lyon's books slightly problematized that, and these images of all of drenchy cities of dead and toxic nuclear wasteland, ecocide as a vision of future war. And originally I wanted to more integrate the fandom way, how fandom sees the Greeks, but then I realized that it's like for something completely different, some next paper, because it only raised further questions, but as one historian said, as a historian, we are not interested in answers. That's for social scientists. But Greek in one way, and despite all this baggage of total war, they're like some kind of male fantasy, because look, you can't say they're men or women. And in later Steve Lyon's books, again, topic for another paper, there are obviously female Greek fighting, only in the books from last 7 years or such. But this ideal of self-identity erasing, soldiering, fighting to the death has this slightly totalitarian appeal, which came from the darker side of the First and Second World War. At the same time, the normal soldiers in the wars of superhumans and monsters, big appeal, and you can see that a lot of this fan art tends to humanize them even further rather than their background. And it's funny that facelessness, the bonus that we don't have to paint face it, but everybody hates that. But at the same time, they are something like idea of total collectivism, that they are all Greeks are ultimate collectivists of the Warhammer 40,000, even beyond the Tau. And that is the other thing with these unfortunate explications. Like, are we the baddies? Do we like to play the bad guys? And then we are trying to say, oh, they're not that bad. Like in Star Wars, the Empire meant well. They committed genocide only several times, and the fascist regime brought order. And no, we can have this kind of feelings also from the Korps of Krieg. And to conclude, and I'm only slightly over time because I'm self-moderating, Max Hastings, a British military historian, when he was describing his experience with this darker side of soldiering, wrote that he came to understand that if Western armies in Normandy had matched the spirit of the Waffen-SS, they would have annihilated the very purpose and the values for which the war was fought. That reminded the Greeks are fighting for, and let me quote the classic, the cruelest and the most bloody regime imaginable. So I'm expanding with my original thesis that Death Corps are cultural representation of discreetly 20th century man-made horrors of the world wars. And I would say that this specific regiment is showing the essence of Imperial Guard as the faction. And this is this struggle of mortals and how they are debasing themselves in faith of the terrible universe is one of the core images of the 41st millennium. Thank you very much, and sorry for being solidly over time.